Joy Taylor, Director of Family Ministry here at Jacksonville Presbyterian Church, and I'm really excited to be doing some interviews with people in our congregation. We're calling this Your Story because I'm really interested in finding out about how God has been working in each of your lives, what the gospel means to you, and just getting to know one another better. You know, we are in this time where we are being isolated from one another, and that's really hard. So hopefully these interviews and hearing about other people's journeys and what God is doing in their lives will help draw us together and become more of a church family, even in getting to know one another better. Our hope is that by the time we all get to meet again, we actually will know more about one another. We'll know how to pray for each other, and we'll know each other's hearts better because of this time together in interviews. So Caroline, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm Caroline Jernigan, and I'm Dustin, the pastor's wife. And I was born in Colorado, got to move all around the United States and the world as a child, and ended up in the Deep South where my mom raised me as a single mom, and loved it there. And as soon as Dustin and I got married, we started moving around the country and kind of seeing different places. And now we're here in Jacksonville, Oregon. We never thought we'd be here, and we love it. It's awesome.
Good. So how many kids do you have?
I have 4 kids. Wait, how many kids do I have? I have 3 kids that are walking about and 1 on the way pretty soon. Right. Any day now. Yeah.
Good. So I was going to say, how long have you been at Jacksonville? Well, how long have you been at Jacksonville, and what's your favorite thing about being part of this church body?
Okay, so we've been here, I think it's been about a full year and a few months, and I feel like we have an easy on-ramp, when we come to a church, because automatically we're welcomed by the community and by the church, and we have an instant community and church family. But I do feel like our church here has particularly welcomed us and just embraced our family and met our needs in major ways. And we truly have relationships here that are deep and give us life, and it's just so sweet to be a part of this church because everybody's so loving.
That's nice. We're happy to have you here, so I'm glad that's been your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about your faith journey and where God really showed up, during different phases of your life.
Yeah. So I mentioned that my mom raised me as a single mom, and I know she would say she realized quickly that she couldn't do it on her own, and she ended up taking us to the Presbyterian church in Jackson, Mississippi. And from that moment, we were going to church every time the doors were open. And I can truly say that there was never a time where I didn't believe that Jesus was my Lord and Savior, and that He died for my sins, and all of that. There are definitely times in my life where either somebody mentored me and called me out on sin, and it really worked in my heart and helped me in my relationship with Christ. Times where I worked at summer camps and my faith grew. And then obviously, being married to a pastor, when Dustin and I met, that rocked my world and rocked my whole faith. We were both, I think I can say we were both in a place where we needed each other, and we needed to be reminded of the gospel and who we are in Christ. And in the same way that I was able to, kind of remind Dustin of that, he definitely reminded me of who I was in Christ. And so that was probably the most significant time in my faith where, I gave everything to the Lord, and truly knew that I was going to have a lifetime of ministry, and devoted my life to being a pastor's wife, which in a funny way is a calling, in a way. Not quite as much as his divine calling from the Lord, but definitely a calling. So
I think all of our callings are equally important.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
You mentioned a little bit about that you had mentors along the way. Is that something that you're interested in doing too for people or for girls?
Absolutely. I think we will be talking about homeschooling later, and I truly see part of my job as a homeschooling mom as mentoring my own 2 daughters, and even Levi in whatever capacity that looks like. And mentoring is such an important thing, and I always am open to that. I have had some people who have nudged their way into my life kind of unexpectedly, it's been such a blessing to be able to pour into their lives,
Mm-hmm.
even feeling like you don't have much to give, the Lord uses you in whatever way,
Yeah.
So that's been sweet.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely open to that. Absolutely.
Nice. I know you've made homeschooling your girls a priority. What made you decide to homeschool in the beginning?
Okay, you're going to have to cut me off because I could talk about this a lot. I do want to first say that, choosing your the education route that you want to take with each of your children is such an individualized for each kid and for the family. It's a huge decision. It's very personal. I do feel privileged that I even have the opportunity to choose homeschooling. I know a lot of people, that's not even on the table for them. So I don't ever, that is not lost on me, that is a huge blessing and privilege, And I will say too, obviously, there are pros and cons to each choice whenever we choose our kids' schooling, and our family takes a pretty big sacrifice with me not working outside of the home to be at home. So there's definitely pros and cons to the decision. And Dustin and I, we were the kind of family that said we would never ever homeschool. We were like, we'll never be those weirdos. And Dustin, before he was a head pastor, he worked in youth ministry, and a lot of us choosing never to homeschool is based off of those weird kids. No, just kidding. But as we went from church to church and we started seeing the kids, and there were certain kids that really kind of, what's the word? What am I looking for? I'll start that sentence over. What's the word? Stepped out or
Yes, stood out.
Stood out. Okay, so as we went from different youth groups, there were different kids that really stood out to us, and we would say whatever their parents did, we want to do what they did because these kids are remarkable. And anyway, they just so happened to be homeschooling families, and they were not perfect kids, and no kids are perfect, but I did start, asking their moms and dads kind of questions. What made you decide to homeschool? How do you homeschool? What does that even look like? What are some of the benefits and some of obviously the cons of homeschooling? And so that's where it started. And I remember when Julep, our oldest, was about to start kindergarten, I just couldn't imagine not being with her and dropping her off all day at a school whenever I knew I would be at home anyway. So for me, that was the first kind of initial, nudge in that direction. And I realized that maybe we can do this. Kids are natural born learners. I don't feel totally qualified, but I know that if God calls me to it, that I can definitely learn what He needs me to learn, to be able to do this. So, yeah.
Okay. What surprised you about homeschooling when you first started? What were you not expecting?
So a lot of people, whenever they homeschool, they try to bring the classroom and replicate it in their own home. That's very common. And I feel like I did the opposite. I kind of just thought it would happen naturally without any effort or structure. And I quickly fell behind of, my personal goals that I had for the girls and for myself, and we fell way behind. Our first year of homeschooling was pretty much a joke. It was just, a lot of fun playing and reading, but there was not really any intentional learning happening. And so I quickly realized that for me to facilitate a learning environment, we had to have structure, and I had to treat it almost like a full-time job. It is pretty much my full-time job. So we'd wake up and we'd have to get started right away. I couldn't let the girls negotiate with me oh, let's not do school today, let's take a day off, because every day was a day off, after a while. So that was something I had to learn pretty quickly. It was time management and how to structure our day so that we really could facilitate real learning, instead of just playing, which playing obviously is a form of learning too, but that was kind of a wake-up call for me whenever I first started homeschooling.
Yeah. Do you have a schedule that you stick by, one day is a specific kind of learning? Or I've noticed that sometimes you will go off-site from home and have special places that you learn. So how did you decide to do that?
So, I tried, one day I wrote down my ideal day for school. And it was pretty much, it wasn't really a schedule, but it was more like a rhythm. What comes after what? What subject is going to come after whatever else we're doing. And so I quickly, hold on. So whenever I realized kind of what the ideal rhythm was that I was kind of wanting to accomplish, it became clear to me that there were things I needed to do beforehand to kind of make sure that we were all ready to go. And so me having the house kind of ready and tidy so that we aren't distracted by mess, and even laying the table, having the table all ready to go with different stacks of books or the girls' individual work, that helps a lot. So there are definitely things we do to try to make sure that we get things done. And my girls respond really well to goals. So I'll say, let's get this whole part of our school day finished, and then you have tons of free time after that, and so that really, they respond well to that. And then we do, with Levi, and we'll maybe talk later about Levi a little bit. With Levi, we have to be extremely flexible, and so on days that he has therapy, we try to like block out the whole day or the morning for therapy so that we're gone out of the house, and we just pack up our books and we go to a local coffee shop, and the girls think it's so much fun to do school in a coffee shop, and we have that flexibility, and so we do that, and it's really fun.
Yeah, it's neat. What surprised you most about homeschooling?
Great question. So I think the thing that surprised me the most was how much I would enjoy it. I knew it'd be fun. I knew it was the right thing for us, and that we definitely felt called to homeschool our kids. But it's become such a joy and such a pleasure. Like, I can't imagine not homeschooling. We do try to, every year assess, what's going well, do things need to change. But as far as homeschooling, I think it's just such a blessing in my life, and I would find so much joy in doing it.
I can tell. Like, it exudes from you. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
What is your favorite part about teaching your kids specifically?
Yeah, so my favorite part is probably just being present with them when those light bulbs go off in their heads. The first time a kid starts reading and things start to click in their mind, it's such a beautiful thing to watch. Or whenever they truly find interest in a subject that, you can't force a kid to find interest in something, but whenever it's truly something from their own heart and they find a history lesson, amazing. It's so neat to be able to talk with them about it and to process that whole part of learning and aspect of learning. So that's definitely my favorite part.
Yeah, it's fun to probably experience when your kids like find a passion in something too, like to discover that with them.
Right, absolutely.
I imagine it's really neat.
Yeah.
So what's challenging? I mean, we all know, like, as moms, like just getting through any day is challenging, but when you're also trying to homeschool, what's something that you find really challenging?
Yeah, so the most challenging thing for me is the time management. Just knowing that I have to wake up and I'm committed that day to, doing the school. School is always our top priority. It's a non-negotiable, for the most part. So we wake up, we have to do school, we get to do school, and we have had, one of our children has a diagnosis of like a visual impairment, which blew us away, because for the longest time I felt like we were, Dustin and I, but mainly me, I felt like I was falling short in being able to teach this specific child how to read, and I couldn't understand what was going on. We tried so many different approaches, and it did feel like a reflection of my ability or inability to teach. And so after we finally were able to get this diagnosis, it just took so much pressure off, because we realized that it's beyond what we think it is. It's actually something that we need to work on with a therapist and a doctor. So that was really challenging those years. The most important thing is to teach your kid to read, and when it doesn't come naturally or easily, it's very alarming. So that was probably challenging, and God definitely used that to teach me that, with the best effort and all that you can muster to like put forth, you still fall short, and the Lord still is able to use you. And
well, that actually leads us into our next question, because I was going to ask you, how has God grown you through going through their challenges, but also just through this adventure in homeschooling kind of?
Yeah, so I would say the Lord has grown me in a way just endless amounts of patience. Not that I have endless amounts of patience, but throughout the day, we sing a song at church. We sang it this past Sunday. I need you every hour. I need you, Lord. I need you. And that truly is like a theme song in my life. And I find myself singing that in my head because you really do depend on the Lord each and every moment of the day. Some days are wonderful, and I would say we get everything knocked off our list. Everything's great. We've been very productive. Some days are just a total bomb, and we kind of have to start over throughout the morning because either mom woke up in a funk or there's a kid that's just not in a cooperative mood, and then we kind of just have to start over. So just our dependency on the Lord to help and to guide us throughout the day. I think that's where he's most grown me with homeschooling.
Yeah. So you also have your sweet Levi, who has some special needs, and you do seem to juggle everything very well. We would never know if you're ever struggling. It does not show. But are there things that you do to make all the demands of your time and attention more manageable?
It's a great question. We are always trying to, it's trial and error, just trying to figure out what could we do to make it more conducive to learning? How can we help Levi to be a part of our family and be a part of learning, but not a distraction? Or that the girls can, focus even with their little brother right there with them. And the beauty of homeschooling is that you get to choose what books you teach, what topics you discuss, and kind of what philosophy of education you want to take on. And what resonated with us is just a very literature-rich and, book-rich curriculum. And so we read all the time. Like, the majority of what we do is reading. We have table work, of course, with math and writing and stuff. And then the rest of what we do is a lot of reading. And so, thankfully, the Lord wired Levi to enjoy reading so much, and so he really just sits with us, and we could be talking about Normandy, and he is still interested in the book because he just loves books and reading. So it's really interesting to see how it has worked. We of course have to be very flexible with Levi, and a lot of times we do school before he even wakes up or during his nap time. Or sometimes our days just spread out way longer because we do need to take some different breaks throughout the day to make sure that Levi is taken care of and his needs are met too. But he just does seem to kind of fit in to our homeschool days in a weird way. Yeah.
Well, that is neat too for the girls, for that to be part of their education in their character qualities, right? Like empathy and compassion, and just knowing how to be good sisters to their brother.
Right. I will say they have definitely been stretched, to a place that I don't think we could have stretched them on our own. I think Levi has really shown them so much and already has taught them so much about life and, like you said, empathy. And they are the most flexible little girls, because they've had to really adjust. Their whole lives have changed, because of Levi, and definitely in positive ways, but in some challenging ways too. So that's been interesting to see, and it's been interesting to try to facilitate how are we going to work with these different issues or things that come up with Levi.
Yeah. You're doing an amazing job with it.
So sweet. I fooled you.
Yeah. So as a mom who's been homeschooling for quite a while now, what do you wish that you would have known when you were just starting out? What would you tell other parents who are thinking about doing it, or who now all of a sudden, because of things happening in our world right now, it's being dropped in their lap kind of?
Right. So I do, I kind of touched on this a little earlier, but so for some families, replicating a conventional classroom may work, but for me and for most of my fellow homeschooling moms that I've been able to talk to, that just doesn't work because, a school classroom in a conventional classroom setting is set up to facilitate 30 or so learners, and it's a whole day affair from the moment they get there to the moment they are dismissed to go home. They have to be managed, and it's a challenge, so things are set in place in the school classroom that help to facilitate that kind of
Yeah.
learning. But at home, you really do have a lot more flexibility. I don't wake up my kids early in the morning to come to the table and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Like, we've never done
Yeah.
anything like that. So I think, if I was starting over, I would like to tell myself, just take it easy, be flexible. Things are not ever going to be perfect, and they're not supposed to be perfect. Any type of schooling is going to have some gaps. And then, just take it day by day, assess each child and see how they're thriving or where you need to adjust. With homeschooling, you have the opportunity to have a completely individualized education for each child and their needs and where their strengths are, and so that's the beauty of it is you are literally learning your children all day.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that I'm trying to help them learn, I'm studying each of them individually, and I'm able to kind of adjust to their needs. So my first curriculum we bought was, a giant notebook. I loved it. I would do it again tomorrow. It's a wonderful box curriculum that you just order from the internet, and they send you everything you need. And it was wonderful. Now I literally have a piece of paper for each term, and we read different books, and it's definitely been simplified a lot. So I would say don't try to replicate the classroom that you grew up kind of experiencing at home, because that's the beauty of homeschooling. You can take it to a coffee shop, go to a pasture, and let your kids run free. You can do it in the nighttime, in the morning, you can do it anytime. It's kind of flexible in that way. Yeah. And then for people who maybe are finding themselves homeschooling, I would maybe give you a little bit different advice. If you know for sure that you're going to send your kids back to school as soon as those doors open, which totally it makes sense, maybe replicating the classroom and keeping your kids' schedule is a good idea, just so that it kind of looks similar to what they're already familiar with, and they maybe have already learned to thrive in that environment, and it's great for them. If you are considering homeschooling long term, or even just for the next year or so, your kids, they love to learn. They already were born learners. God knitted that into us when He made us to enjoy learning, and there's not much you need to do. I love to think of it as like setting a feast before your kids. If you give them beautiful books that are interesting, we don't do textbooks in our house. All of our books are stories, historical stories or accounts of things that have happened. So if you give your kids these beautiful materials to work with and books to work with, they will naturally be drawn to it, and a joy of learning will be fostered in them instead of me. I'm never like downloading information from my brain to their brain,
Right.
It's more about me kind of setting the table for them and just walking alongside them. We are always learning together. It's not like I have all this information for them, Yeah.
I think that's one of the great things about teaching, is that you really do learn along with the kids you're teaching, whether they're your own or a classroom full. But I like that visual picture of laying out a feast of things before them.
Right. And in homeschooling, you get to choose what to serve.
Right.
If there are things that you have always wished that you would have learned, or always wished that you would have been able to study, or if you have a child who does have a specific interest in a topic like dinosaurs or a different time in history, you really are able to hand pick and help them, find those things. And the honesty is that just homeschoolers we're not the only ones allowed to do that. It's beautiful that even and our church has so many different families who are amazing families who truly do the same things that I do throughout the day after they've worked a full day, or after, on the weekends, or their summers look so full of learning and education in a different way than what is presented at school. And so just because you homeschool, that's not your only opportunity to teach your kids in this way. There's a lot of homeschooling outside of the typical classroom too,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's true. So you are from, a lot of different places, but Mississippi is mainly where you grew up. And obviously the culture here is a little bit different than it was there, I'm sure. But what's one thing that you would consider Southern that you want to really make sure you instill in your children?
Yeah, good question. No, it's so funny because I was thinking about this question. You gave me a sneak peek of what you were going to ask me, and I feel like Southern Oregon truly is similar to a lot of the different cultural attributes of the South that I'm from, that I'm familiar with. In the South, Mississippi in particular is known as a hospitality state, and you are always in people's homes. There's a major focus on community and fostering relationships with people. You can, meet somebody at a coffee shop and you start naming off people that you know, and everybody knows each other. And that's a beautiful thing about the South, is that it's a close-knit group of people, and usually you're probably related to somebody, cousins with somebody. But for my girls, just teaching them to always, have their hands open and not shut, that they are always welcoming to other people. My mom in particular taught me to always treat people with kindness. She worked at a hospital for most of her life, and any day that I would go with her, from the moment we got out of the car, walking through the front door, she would know people's names, and it didn't matter if they were the janitor who was, sweeping the floor, or if they were the head chancellor of the medical school. She knew everybody's name, and they knew her name, and she treated them with dignity and respect. And that just, that's not only a Southern attribute, but that definitely had an impression on me, just to be kind and open to anyone, and to have my hands open, and if they have needs, to just be willing to meet them if I'm able. So I would love to teach that to the girls. Now, that's a little challenging to teach them, but hopefully that'll...
Well, you're modeling it for them for sure, so that's it. Great. And then, is there anything about raising your kids here in the Northwest that excites you, or that you like the aspect that this area brings?
Yeah. I feel like we are in such a beautiful place. Like, just our surroundings are incredible. You almost feel like you're sinning if you're not outside on a beautiful day, And in the South, it really is hot and muggy, and so you stay indoors in your air-conditioned home often, So I love that here we are able to just get outdoors and go fly fishing, or go hike a mountain, or just, even lying down in the grass on a beautiful day and not having bugs all over you. It's wonderful. So I love that we are always called to the outdoors here. It seems like that's the case.
Yeah. That's neat. Okay, so as a pastor's wife, one thing that is there one thing that you'd like us to know about being a pastor's wife, or any misconceptions that you feel like are out there, not just about being a pastor's wife, but a pastor's family with having your kids, And I know my dad was a pastor's kid, so he will always tell me stories about different, things that went on. But are there any things that you would want us to know?
So I can't preach. There is one person in our family who is called to public speaking, and it's Dustin. It's not me.
I don't know. Eloise could she could step up someday.
Yeah. Maybe one of the girls will surprise us. But it's so funny because I love Jesus. I love the Word of God, but I could never get up there and preach. So and nobody's ever expected that of me, or even to teach. But not all pastors' wives can teach or preach. And I would just say we're normal people. We are the same as everybody else. We have the same struggles. We always have to work on things in our own family, and we do enjoy we love having people in our home, which is kind of unique because some pastors do kind of want to have a protected space at their house, but we just for some reason enjoy having people in our home. So we're unique in that way. But anyway, we're just normal people. Yeah, there's nothing special about us.
I think you guys are really special, but I get what you're saying. Okay, well, in closing, is there anything else that you think that we should know in regards to either homeschooling or just in general about who you are?
So I would maybe just finish with saying, we all in life have these goals and checklists, especially for our kids, that we want them to meet. And I have the same goals for my kids, and wishes and hopes that they can learn these different facts, or that they can memorize these things, or get to these different accomplishments in their schooling. But at the end of the day, it's truly what's in their heart. being able to do character building and to process through different hardships with them, the natural consequences that come into their lives, you know, that we're able to walk alongside with them. That's what really matters, you know. And so even, you know, my kids are pretty young still. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old and 5, but my 10-year-old is able to come to me with all these huge life questions that just have opened my eyes to kind of what's going on in her little heart. And that's such a beautiful thing, is to work on those things. I enjoy that way more than memorizing times tables. Not that they're, you know, that's important too, but at the end of the day, that's what matters. So that's really been something eye-opening to me. And, you know, every parent can relate to that. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, and you are just a lovely example of a Christian mom and woman, and you're just a blessing to us. So thank you so much for being willing to share.